My name is Joe Samaniego, founder of the Grid Network and the Grid Rankin. I live in Oregon with my wife and our dog Kiska. March 11th started somewhat normal. NASCAR, they were going to race at Atlanta the upcoming weekend. IndyCar was at St. Petersburg to start off their weekend, as well as Formula One at Melbourne, Australia. We had supercar racing as well in Melbourne. World Rally Championship was in Mexico. And it was essentially going to be the start of the Grid Rankin in a couple of weeks, so it was always an exciting time mid-March. What was not normal that day was the news occurring outside of racing. The virus known as COVID-19 was spreading around the globe and was starting to come to the United States. Just a weekend before, MotoGP called off their season opener at Qatar for the Qatar Grand Prix. But no other racing series had been affected that much. And I remember on March 11th, walking my dog Kiska with my wife, I forgot my cell phone that day, which rarely happens. And once we got home, and I saw everything that had occurred on my cell phone, I was just blown away. Walking down this hill seems to be the last time I remember life pre-pandemic. Because ever since then, it's just been nothing but uncertainty in 2020.
Well, the first two games between these teams were in Utah. The Thunder in the final 18 will play Utah two more times, and both of those will be here in Oklahoma City.
I remember sitting on my bed at UNC Charlotte in my dorm waiting for the Utah Jazz and Oklahoma City Thunder NBA game to tip off. There was a lot of confusion because everyone was wondering why the game hadn't started yet. Without a doubt, something big was going down. Chris Paul, who was playing for the Thunder at the time, could be seen asking, "Where's Rudy at?" referring to the Utah Jazz star center Rudy Gobert from France. Shortly after that, it was announced that the game was canceled, and even more confusion set in. Then we saw the news on social media that Rudy Gobert had tested positive for COVID-19. When I first heard that Rudy Gobert tested positive for COVID-19, to be honest with you, I had no idea what to think. I was in my mind, I'm like, "Oh my goodness, this is about to get bad, isn't it?" And then I was on timeline checking Twitter, seeing what people were saying, and people were saying the same thing I was saying, like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And then I see a tweet coming from Woj saying that the NBA had suspended the season, and I'm thinking, what? The NBA is suspending the season? Are you serious right now? It was just unbelievable. It was unprecedented, something that you never expected to see. And then the very next morning, when the NCAA tournament got canceled, I was like, "Wow, this is real." And they didn't even finish up the ACC tournament down down here in North Carolina, and it was really crazy and surreal to experience it firsthand.
I remember that a couple of days later, Italy, where we are based right now, came into full lockdown. And that, of course, changed everything.
That weekend, following NASCAR, IndyCar, especially those two in the United States, it started out as a surprise, shocking surprise when we heard they're gonna race with no fans. Then IndyCar announced they were not gonna race at all that weekend. The initial thought was, of course, being a street circuit in a city, harder for crowd control. But then when NASCAR announced they were not gonna run in Atlanta, that's when it really became real of what this run pandemic was starting to turn into. I remember being surprised that Formula One hadn't done any sort of announcement. They were still going to race as planned. But I wasn't aware of the situation in Australia.
Formula One was about to start their 2020 season at Albert Park for the Australian Grand Prix. Literally, every other major sports league in the world were calling off their events effective immediately, but Formula One was pushing forward with their race, and they were like the last one standing, I believe. And this move was met with a lot of criticism because COVID-19 was beginning to become a major problem globally. Despite the criticism, Formula One was determined to race no matter what, even if we didn't have a full 20-car grid, and the noise got even louder when a member of the McLaren Formula One team tested positive for COVID-19, and which led to the shocking press release that McLaren was withdrawn from the race. And after this, we saw more pushback from Formula One teams and drivers. Lewis Hamilton famously said, "Cash is king," in reference to describe why Formula One higher ups wanted to put on this race so bad, despite potentially exposing the whole paddock to this new virus. After trying their hardest for the longest time to race anyways, Formula One management finally gave in and canceled the Australian Grand Prix.
We knew the virus was really spreading across Europe. That was one of the big factors with MotoGP's race being called off. Travel restrictions to Qatar. A lot of teams were based in Italy, the riders as well, and we saw the situation in Italy was really dire at that time.
What followed were very hard month. I had COVID myself. I was isolating in my house for 60 days. And it was tough, of course, without seeing anyone. My whole family basically got COVID. We were all isolating, and we were not able to even see each other in the same house. And it was tough. And basically I just had some entertainment with the online races, with the esports that went around the world for a couple of months.
And then all the questions, all the uncertainty. When are we going to race? Are we going to race the next weekend?
Another racing event in question on this particular weekend was Super Sebring, which consisted of the FIA World Endurance Championship 1,000 miles of Sebring and IMSA's Mobil 1 12 hours of Sebring. Italian WEC LMP2 team Cedolari Racing withdrew from the 1,000 miles of Sebring due to the rising number of COVID-19 cases in Italy during the early days of the pandemic. The FIA World Endurance Championship later canceled the round altogether due to new travel restrictions put into place by the U.S. government and rising number of COVID-19 cases. For a while, it seemed like IMSA would move ahead with the 12 hours of Sebring, and sports car racer David Hannemeyer Hansen was the loudest voice against the decision to continue racing. At the time, his views were considered widely unpopular, and people lit him up on Twitter for being concerned about holding a race during this time. A lot of people thought Hannemeyer Hansen was overreacting, but DHH kept saying it was a terrible decision to push forward with plans to race as normal while everyone else all around the world changing their plans and suspending operations. Ultimately, he made the hard decision to pull himself out of the Sebring 12-hour race, doing what he thought was right to protect himself, his family, and everybody's health. And later on, IMSA decided to postpone Sebring until November, and David Hannemeyer Hansen didn't miss the race after all.
For W Series as a championship, for some of us, it was a little bit concerning that we read articles on the web saying that it was maybe a huge setback for them because, of course, missing their second year. We read reports saying they are on risk of never coming back.
This uncertainty was really challenging because it was something where I feel when there's big major events that occur outside of racing, motorsports is the escape from that. I remember 9/11, the first race back after the tragic events on 9/11 was the IndyCar race. It was a good way to forget everything that happened, but of course it was marred by Alex Zanardi's crash. Dover, the first NASCAR race after 9/11. Seeing Dale Earnhardt Jr. win, carry the American flag around, it really helped. This situation, we didn't have that. We didn't have a race to look forward to. And we didn't know when or if we'll get to race again in 2020.
I was pretty much convinced that we wouldn't have not seen any races at all happening in 2020.
After I saw cancellations all across the motorsports world, I'll admit to you guys, I kind of went to a dark place because I had no idea what was going to happen next. Everyone that knows me know that racing is my life. It's my everything to me. Without racing, I'm nothing. I'm nobody. And I admit it was really hard to accept the fact that we weren't going to have any racing going on all over the world. And it was a hard time for me, and I'm sure it was a hard time for everyone else. But looking at everything on a larger scale, it was a hard time for me career wise because I was actually supposed to do an internship in NASCAR last summer, and it looked like everything was looking up for me. I was gonna get this internship, get, get some experience working in the sport, and that would propel me to a full-time opportunity in the future. But unfortunately, and I do understand the decision, and they made the right call. NASCAR was losing a lot of money during this time, and the virus was still surging, so they made the decision to cancel the internship altogether. And it was a major blow to me because I've been working so many years. Well, in recent years, I've been working so hard to get this internship because I felt like this internship would be my key to finding a full-time job in NASCAR someday. And when I got word that this internship had been canceled, I was devastated. And I think devastated is an understatement because I felt like my entire soul was crushed. Because imagine working so hard all of these years to get to this point and then have it completely taken away from you. And at this point, I'm thinking it's over. I'm done for.
It was really good having the racing to come back. We saw a great race in Darlington for NASCAR. I know I was thrilled when IndyCar returned back. We were going to have to wait a little while for Formula One, MotoGP. But NASCAR coming back was a sense of we're going to get a little bit more towards normalcy. We're going to start going back to how life was before the pandemic. And it was another event outside of racing that brought the realization to many in the country that, especially in the United States, life before the pandemic wasn't that great.
Floyd, say his name. George Floyd. Say his name. George Floyd. I can't breathe. George Floyd. No justice.
While fighting a global pandemic, we also had to fight an old foe that has plagued our society for many, many years. An old foe that doesn't want to give up, called racism. Following the tragic death of George Floyd, we saw many cries for change all across the United States. We even saw countries overseas standing with the U.S. in the fight against racism and shared outrage due to the killing of George Floyd.
What happened with George Floyd? That video really was shocking. And unfortunately, it's not the first time something like that had been shown. I remember years ago, a person in Oakland, video showed him on his back and he was shot while on the ground, pinned to the ground by an officer, shot him in the back. And this video from George Floyd in Minneapolis really, I think, was the breaking point for the country to say this is unacceptable. We can't have the systematic racism and really woke up everybody. And again, I felt like, Well, NASCAR is going to be racing this upcoming weekend. And it's again going to be an escape from this horrible news and the growing tension in the United States. But things started to look a little different. It started on Instagram when Ty Dillon invited Bubba Wallace to discuss about racism.
NASCAR's only black driver at the cup level today, Bubba Wallace decided to use his platform to bring attention to social injustice.
And it was really there once Bubba Wallace started sharing his experience of being an African American in the United States, the racism he's faced. And seeing Ty Dillon's face, especially when Bubba Wallace shared the story of police officers drawing guns at him, asking him, can he really afford this vehicle? Implying that he shouldn't be driving something like that he may have stolen it. I think that really started to set the tone where this wasn't just going to be a problem outside of car racing, motorsports, that you are coming to our sport to forget about and then go back to face once the race is over. Instead, it was NASCAR saying, hey, we need to do something. And I'll never forget that speech at Atlanta Motor Speedway.
NASCAR itself recognized the ongoing situation in the U.S. of many Black Americans calling for a change in our country. NASCAR President Steve Phelps addressed the situation before the start of the Folds of Honors Quick Trip 500 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. On pit road prior to the race, Bubba was seen on pit road wearing an American flag mask with a t-shirt that read, "I can't breathe," which were the last words we heard from George Floyd before his death. Under that "I can't breathe," it said Black Lives Matter. This was only the beginning for Bubba Wallace. He wasn't just a NASCAR driver anymore. He also became an activist and a leader in the fight against racism.
When the NASCAR president, Steve Phelps, got on the radio and said our country is hurting, we need to do better as a country and as a sport, that was a very powerful moment that I'll never forget. Seeing all the NASCAR race cars stopped on that front stretch, silence in the entire venue, and the pit crews standing, and Bubba Wallace had one pit crew member holding a Black Lives Matter shirt. I really felt this was NASCAR not just saying we're an escape from the troubles going on in our country, but we as NASCAR want to use our platform to make the country a better place for everybody. And then to see Bubba Wallace, of course, was Richard Petty Motorsports, doesn't have the most funded, doesn't have the most competitive cars. I would even say he wasn't really seen as a leader entering the 2020 season. But he became a leader in 2020.
Later on, he suggested that NASCAR should consider removing the Confederate flag from the track, and NASCAR listened to his request and banned the rebel flag from all tracks and facilities. This move not only sent shockwaves through the NASCAR community, but the impact was felt all around the country.
And really demonstrated that NASCAR was going to stick to what they said in Atlanta, that they were going to be a better sport. And of course, NASCAR even recognized Pride Month for the LGBT community, which is huge. Too often I feel members of the LGBT community feel left out, feel unsafe. Now NASCAR is saying, you are not only safe here, you are welcome here.
Many people consider Bubba Wallace a true hero, while others decided to get nasty and personal about it. Reading all of those racist, ignorant comments online towards Bubba really hurt my heart, if I'm being honest with you. I can't imagine how Bubba felt. as angry folks started coming out of the woodshed to voice their displeasure about the Confederate flag disappearing from NASCAR. Then Bubba ran a special paint scheme at the Martinsville night race, driving the number 43 Black Lives Matter Chevrolet. The all-black car had three powerful words on the hood: compassion, love, understanding. Three things that we really need a lot more of in today's society.
Bubba Wallace is no doubt a hero, and he wasn't the only one. Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton, definitely one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Formula One driver to ever race. He started using his platform. He called out all the drivers to not be silent on Twitter. After he said that, Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, more and more drivers started coming out that they opposed what's happening. Lando Norris had a Black Lives Matter profile picture on his social media.
2020 saw the Mercedes Formula One team turn the Silver Arrows all black to support its driver Lewis Hamilton in the ongoing fight against racism and inequality. And Formula One launched an initiative, hashtag We Race as One.
And that really started Formula One's effort of We Race as One, acknowledging that they have the platform to end racism and discourage racism and systematic racism. Formula E, when they came back in Berlin, they introduced Positively Charged Initiative to get rid of systematic racism, try to be a more inclusive, environmentally friendly sport, and more gender equality. Something we need to see more in motorsports. It was very unfortunate the W Series was cancelled this year.
Series got cancelled, and after they were late to announcing that a little bit. Of course, we all knew that they were evaluating all their options with DTM. Of course, it was a huge talking point because it was very hard for them because they missed a couple of competitors. Of course, only BMW remained in the championship because the Audi also announced that they would have at the end of this season they would have abandoned the series. So DTM was not in a good situation, and W Series, of course, being a support series to DTM, it was very hard for them to try to scrap together a calendar for 2020. And of course, with being a global series, being an international series with female drivers coming from all over the world, of course, Miki Koyama is coming from Japan. Then there was Sabre Cook in the United States being one of the hot spots coming into the spring and summer months. So it was very, very extremely challenging for them to try to even fly over these drivers for the championship, for a potential 2020 championship. And it would have been fair at all for some of them not getting the opportunities to travel and to race. And I think ultimately they took the right decision to cancel the 2020 series championship altogether.
It's no doubt that was a missed opportunity for all the female drivers that were looking forward to 2020, leaving many without plans.
For instance, like drivers like Alice Powell or Emma Kimiläinen proved with their 2019 championships that they did belong to such an important platform, and yet they found themselves again out of a seat. Drivers like Vicky Piria, for example, or other drivers that did not have the chance to with budgets to go racing elsewhere. So this was a little bit concerning and alarming, of course, because we knew them, and we knew that they did belong to the racetrack, and seeing them without a seat, it was hard, of course, at the beginning.
and some were able to make plans and find rides and competitive races.
Drivers with budgets coming back to racing, and drivers with no budgets having another forced year stop. So of course, as society as a whole, I think this crisis was an accelerator of social differences. It was not how at the very beginning we could have thought the same for everybody, of course. But this is a wider concept, of course, not just related to motor racing, which of course it's a sport, but it's important for us. But social problems all around the world showed that this crisis was a differentiator for social classes, of course.
Living in the United States, seeing the news, the cases that occurred of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the countless others, it was a stressful time. I know the ugly events at Talladega.
Later in the summer, we thought someone had tied a noose in Bubba Wallace's garage stall at Talladega Superspeedway in retaliation to him taking a stand against racism and asking NASCAR to sack the Confederate flag. The pre-race scene was something that I'll never, ever forget. Bubba sat in his car as drivers pushed his number 43 Chevrolet to the front of the grid. As every driver and crew member stood with him, around this time the hashtag #IStandWithBubba went viral. We saw many athletes and celebrities acknowledging Bubba's bravery, including NBA star LeBron James.
When we had the incident in Talladega, and obviously it's been a pretty tense weekend itself, and obviously in an election year, things have been quite crazy in its own way. And to have that news incident happen right there in Alabama, where historically a lot has gone wrong, especially for Black and brown people in this country, it was a crazy thing. And you really felt like something crazy happened. And then once we came back up the race the next day, and everyone walked down pit lane and everyone walked with him, and that moment itself was pretty crazy. But I will say, just that, I gotta say, for Bubba, that probably was like almost like in a weird way, like a wake-up call. Like, listen, I know I might be a race car driver, and they might not be able to always see what I look like when I'm in the car, when I'm in my suit with my helmet on, but at the end of the day, you're gonna always appear brown, black, however you want to go by it, so I think that was a big wake-up moment for him, and it woke up a lot of other people, and also brought more people to the sport as well. And I thought that was one of the biggest things itself, especially obviously with the ban of the Confederate flag. That was a huge deal. And
those saying that Bubba Wallace owes an apology. No, he doesn't. Bubba never saw that news. The circumstances around that weekend, it was such a tense weekend in Talladega. Start off with no fans, really eerie, a small, limited number of fans, 5,000 fans at most, I believe. Confederate flag being flown above the superspeedway in protest. Protesters outside the speedway with Confederate flags. And then the discovery of that news on that Sunday morning. It was something where NASCAR, they took it very seriously. They contacted the FBI to investigate it. And while that news wasn't in place to deliberately intimidate Bubba Wallace, it was still a news. And at the end, NASCAR said they wouldn't do anything differently.
Bubba got attacked on Twitter by President Donald Trump. And President Trump tweeted, I quote, "Has Bubba Wallace apologized to all of those great NASCAR drivers and officials who came to his aid, stood by his side, and were willing to sacrifice everything for him, only to find out that the whole thing was just another hoax. That and flag decision has caused lowest ratings ever." And obviously, it wasn't a hoax, but more so of a misunderstanding of the situation that saw NASCAR take action. NASCAR President Steve Phelps even said he would have issued a lifetime ban to the culprit if caught. And like I said, we're very lucky that a hate crime wasn't committed and everybody moved on to continue making NASCAR a more inclusive, welcoming environment for all.
When you think about it, it's like, man, I grew up watching NASCAR, so obviously I've seen the changes and seen everything, go from the inside and from the outside of the sport. So, that moment itself, I think, was a really, really big turning point. And obviously, the Black Lives Matter car running at Martinsville, that was a huge deal, and it got a lot of attention. That was something. It was different. And I couldn't believe it. I had friends reaching out to me that don't even watch the sport, and I think that was, a huge impact. But I think, Bubba realized that there's a lot of weight on his shoulder, especially being the only predominantly black driver like in the sport. So that's a huge weight, especially dealing with everything that's been going on in this country. Obviously, we've had a bevy of things happen, and I can't list every single one of them, unfortunately. But I hate to even do it. But man, that itself is just crazy that he's been able to help bring awareness to fans that may have not really understood it at the time. So and then obviously the biggest announcement was him moving to 23XI Racing with Michael Jordan and Denny.
At the end of the race, when Bubba was getting interviewed, he went all the way up to the fence, at the lower level of the grandstands, and he high fived some of his fans that were standing down there at the fence, and some of them were children, and it was just an incredible sight to see. It was like we're getting a new generation of NASCAR fans here, and we're going to be heading into a new era with Bubba Wallace leading the diversity charge.
And it's like the car was just pulling all the way to the right-hand side. The fact that Romain Grosjean has survived that crash is not only miraculous, but quite frankly, marvelous.
In 2020, we also saw pretty huge crashes in motorsport. We all know that it is part of the racing. It is a very dangerous sport. It's written on all on the back on all passes when we enter a racetrack. We all know there is a possibility, there is a distant possibility that someone can get hurt from racing, but we never think that it's actually gonna happen until things can go wrong.
The dangers in motorsports, we know it's always there. I still remember the first time growing up when a race car driver passed away from an accident on the track. I still remember the day Ayrton Senna passed away. Watching Greg Moore's fatal crash live on television at Fontana. Dale Earnhardt, of course. Dan Weldon. It seems it gets harder and harder to process and acknowledge when we have a fatal accident. We're so used to the safety working and keeping everyone safe. And we really had some scary moments in 2020 that if it wasn't for those safety advancements that we learned from the crashes that I mentioned, Senna, Earnhardt, Weldon, I don't want to think of the idea of losing any one of the drivers that survived the horrible crashes of 2020, like Romain Grosjean.
And we saw the accidents from Romain Grosjean in Formula One. We saw the MotoGP huge crash at the Red Bull Ring. We saw in NASCAR also some very serious accidents. But somehow 2020, these were huge accidents. The Grosjean one, I was very shocked about that.
We saw Romain Grosjean survive an unbelievable fiery crash into an Armco barrier, which saw his Haas Formula One car split in half, literally, and burst into flames.
I think I never saw something like that happening in my lifetime. And I've been following motorsport for quite some time. I'm 31 and I've been watching races since I was 3 maybe, on track since I was 5. and I've never seen an accident like that with a car breaking the armor core barriers and catching fire like that. Those were things that happened in the 70s and 60s and the 70s, and luckily I thought we were not going to see anything like that anymore.
I'll never forget the nerves of waiting for Grosjean to climb out of the car. It looked like something straight out of a movie, an action movie.
Romain Grosjean's crash, that first lap in the Bahrain Grand Prix, I just remembered when they went to that camera angle where you can see the main stretch. You saw Kimi Räikkönen off in the dirt. Then all of a sudden you see Roman's car just go sideways towards that guardrail. I really anticipate to see the car just sort of bounce back across the track, spinning around. And then when you just saw it disappear from the side because of the guardrail, and then just this burst of flames and debris flying across, I really feared the worst. This is the kind of crash we've seen in the 1970s in Formula One. And we know they were most of the time fatal. I really could just remember that feeling of scared, nervousness, and just bracing for the worst.
I felt like when we didn't saw that, but when the Bianchi accident happened in Suzuka, I felt a little bit like that in the first minutes of the Grosjean accident.
And this incident just shows us that safety has truly come a long way. 10 to 15 years ago, I don't think Grosjean would have survived the accident. It would have been fatal, probably. And Grosjean did receive some burns to his hands and later underwent the procedure. Luckily, Dr. Ian Roberts and Formula One medical car driver Allen were in the right place at the right time to help save Roman's life. And this was a stark reminder that despite all of the safety innovations that we've seen in motorsports over the years, racing will always forever be a dangerous sport.
Also lost drivers and co-drivers. From a female perspective, we lost Laura Salvo in the Portuguese rally in October, on the 10th of October. So this is always news that we would never want to report.
Safety still has a long way to go. And I'm so grateful that we have the halo in Formula One. That halo, along with all the others, safety advancements in that car, kept Roman safe. That was the biggest sigh of relief I can remember since Ryan Newman's crash at Daytona.
I'll never forget the final lap of the 2020 Daytona 500. Denny Hamlin was out front on the backstretch then. Here comes the 6 and the 12 locking bumpers. Ryan Blaney pushed Ryan Newman to the lead, and with this aero package, the runs were way too big for the car out front to block properly. Unfortunately, this played a factor in the crash that left many people stunned in silence. Ryan Newman spun off the front bumper of Ryan Blaney, hit the wall hard, entering the trioval coming to the start-finish line. And the hit was so violent that Newman's car turned upside down and got launched in the air by Cora LaJoie coming at full speed. And Newman was hit by LaJoie in the driver's door first, upside down, and slid to a stop on his roof. And we heard absolutely nothing on the radio from Ryan Newman.
Horrible wreck. Scary wreck. Not the kind of wreck we see at Talladega when a car goes airborne, lands on its wheels, and the driver comes out. The fact that there was no replays, they were not showing anything from Newman's car or what's left of it, was really sending that message that this wasn't good.
And it was such an eerie scene. And then having NASCAR and Fox go off the air without a clear picture of Newman's situation, it was just very unsettling.
And then when they went off the air, this is where, of course, again, you just sort of brace for the worst. Social media is pretty much on fire at this point. People are just concerned, expressing their concerns, their fears, a entire range of emotions of hoping Ryan Newman was okay. There were reports, unconfirmed, going around. Some saying he was seriously injured, some saying he was fine. I just remember just thinking, waiting for that official statement from Roush Fenway Racing, from Daytona International Speedway, or NASCAR. And it took a long while till we got the first update from Roush Fenway Racing. And hearing that he wasn't in critical condition was a huge relief. But the best thing was a few days later when we all saw the picture Ryan Newman and his two daughters walking out of that hospital. Dad brought tears of joy and relief again to see Ryan Newman be able to go home with his family. Dad would just really, it really showed how NASCAR had learned since 2001 on making the vehicles safer and the racing safer for the drivers. Despite everything, 2020 saw some really good championship battles this year. One of the most unpredictable ones was MotoGP, actually. Without Marc Marquez there, we had 9 different winners. And Joan Mir, the points leader, had not won a race in MotoGP. And he took the championship with 1 win. Consistency paying off for him. He clinched it in the second to last race, bringing Suzuki a championship. Of course, we all know Portugal wasn't exactly the greatest race, but he got the job done. MotoGP champion. And it was just something where I didn't anticipate that from MotoGP. We've seen the prior 2 years, Marc Marquez, win after win after win. 2-time grid ranking world champion. But with his injury, it really opened up MotoGP to have so many different winners.
The 2019-2020 ABB FIA Formula E season ended with 6 straight races in Berlin. Antonio Felix da Costa and DS Techeetah ran away with the championship. And the ending of the season in Berlin was a good time for all of us here at Grid Network because we teamed up with Jack from Formula E Zone to bring you all Formula E Fest coverage to all of our viewers. I personally enjoy working with Jack, witnessing his passion firsthand and absorbing his knowledge about Formula E. And in 2021, Grid Network hopes to continue our growing relationship with Jack and Formula E Zone.
For Formula One, Lewis Hamilton surpassing Michael Schumacher for wins, earning his 7th Formula One World Championship, breaking records consistently in Formula One. It is truly special to witness what he's doing. I still remember 1994 with Michael Schumacher racing. I barely remember 1992, of course. 93 was very vague. But 1994, when Schumacher got his first world championship out of 7. Now witnessing that again, this time with Lewis Hamilton. That activism role has been really great because he has such a platform as a 7-time Formula One world champion. And I'm super excited that he is going to be knighted. A huge honor in the United Kingdom.
The Richard Mille racing team in the European Le Mans Series racing for the first time in the LMP2 category. They did Le Mans. It was the first all-female crew racing in Le Mans in that class. The Iron Dames in the GTE also did Le Mans again. They both finished in the top 10 again. So it was Sophia Flörsch coming in into the FIA Formula 3 Championship for the first time. There was a woman back into the Formula 1 weekend. So it was a big year for some of them. So, luckily, we did get to report from trackside for some of these races.
2020 NASCAR Cup Series season produced a first-time champion with Dawsonville, Georgia's very own Chase Elliott winning the title. Elliott peaked late in the season to formulate enough momentum to carry him to the hardware. In a season dominated by Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin, nobody expected Chase Elliott to become the Cup champion this year. With the playoff format and 2 disappointing races, Kevin Harvick didn't even advance to the championship 4, and Denny Hamlin finished 4th in the standings. And also looking at something else on a larger note, the sport also said goodbye to 3 drivers. Matt Kenseth for the 3rd time, Clint Boyer, who's moving to NASCAR on Fox with Jeff Gordon and Mike Joy, and 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion Jimmy Johnson. While Johnson spent the final 3 years of his career winless, he left a legacy in NASCAR that will live on forever. NASCAR will miss Jimmy Johnson as he moves on to a new chapter in his life as an IndyCar driver. But it will never forget 5 straight years of dominance, which we saw him getting 7 titles and 83 victories, and more importantly, a class act on and off the track.
If finally this nightmare of a year is coming to an end, and we are approaching a new year, hopefully we all hope that on every side, from the working side, from you know the global health situation, things will improve. Of course, vaccines are providing some kind of hope. We don't know yet, of course, when things will be back to normal and what normal will mean after this crisis. But still there is some hope, and we can just, right now, we can just pray that we will have a little bit of a more normal racing season in 2021. Of course, it's very likely that at the end of the year, races will be held in the same situation as they were in 2020, so very much restricted to the audience, restricted to some media. It will not be easy to do our job on track, of course, with all the restrictions. But still, it's important that some racing is going on.
2020. The things that are going to stand out the most from the 2020 year is definitely how motorsports has become something where it's no longer just pushing the changes in automotive technology, automotive safety, but pushing us as a society to be better. Bubba Wallace, Lewis Hamilton, the initiatives by Formula E Positively Charged, NASCAR, to be a more inclusive, welcoming sport, and allowing the drivers to use their platform to call for positive changes, really something to be proud of. Motorsports, I think too often we think of it as the stereotype, guys that only like cars, they don't care about anything going outside. But for the motorsports, the drivers to say, we need to make the sport better and we need to be better as a country, as a society, that's really going to stand out. And I'm looking forward to this continuing on in the future.
Unfortunately, there is still the need for websites like ours. There's still the need to report and to see that women can be at the same level of men in motorsport. It's a still very imbalanced environment, and there's still a lot of prejudice, unfortunately. So we think that there still is the necessity of a website like ours and voices like ours to see, even for younger generations, because when you see something it's very clear that you can do it. And so it's very important for the younger generation to read news like this and to see talented drivers like the ones that we are following, because it's important that women can be at the same level in motorsport and in every other sport, like men. And of course, this is why we do what we do.
Motorsports is one of the most beautiful sports out there. The combination of the drivers, the engineers, trying to get the most out of the vehicle, the most out of the driver, and then of course the team behind that driver. There's no other sport like it. And there's no other sport where a man and a woman are equals behind that vehicle. I'm looking forward to 2021, the W Series returning back. That's going to be wonderful. Definitely one of the drivers I feel made a big impact in 2020 was Charlie Martin. Transgender woman out there racing, using her platform to say, hey, I want to make motorsports better for the LGBTQA and draw fans from the LGBTQA community to motorsports. And that is something where 2021, that's going to be part of the Grids initiative. We want to be that introduction to motorsports for new fans. And definitely, considering everything that has happened in 2020, I feel motorsports has been a big positive, and looking forward to what is going to contribute in 2021. This is Joe Samaniego. I want to thank you for taking the time watching our documentary of the 2020 racing year. 2020 was a very interesting year for everybody involved with motorsports and not involved with the motorsports. We definitely invite you to share what 2020 was for you. We know for a lot of folks 2020 wasn't a great year. For some folks there was some bright spots in 2020. We invite everyone to share in the comments, get a discussion going, and we just want to be there so that way we can discuss, because we know we just all went through a crazy year together. No point in just hiding for some of us our grief, because at the end that's not really a healthy decision. We invite everyone watching to please like and subscribe, because 2021 we're going to be back again, following motorsports, reporting on the news. We're very excited to work with Daniel from Racers, the girls behind the helmet again, especially when the W Series comes back. 2020, first year of the Grid Network. Overall, we'll say it was a good year for us, but we know there's a lot of folks that can't say that. And we've all had our personal struggles here and there as well, as we shared in this documentary. On behalf of everyone, we wish everyone a happy New Year's ahead, a wonderful, safe 2021, and we're looking forward to enjoying the races again with you together.